Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, medical practice operating like well-oiled machine. It's always DNS SSO edition. Backup Groundhog Day. You woke me up for this? Forever the AV guy. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Medical practice operating like well-oiled machine. Inspired by you/arbitrary_pseudonym and IT guy ran off to Malaysia, I decided to share my experience onboarding a large medical practice. I support a large medical practice that is part of a multi-state network of standardized practices. They have no in-state IT resources, so I often go onboard practices that have joined. Most of the time, these are simple jobs that can be done in a day. This is even true with most large practices, as they tend to have internal IT managing an organized environment. I get the briefing from the project manager on this clinic. Large, established practice, 200 to 250 workstations, and they have internal IT. I am thinking cool, the usual cakewalk. Since they close at noon on Fridays, we schedule the job. A few days before the job, I reach out to their IT guy, just to ask a few questions and see if he will go ahead and roll out the RMM software that makes my onboarding life easier. When I ask him to create a GPO to deploy the .msi that I will share, he responds sure. However, it was sure in that way that actually means sure. I do not know what you are talking about, but I will Google it until I do. Then I get on site. Turns out they are replacing 100 plus workstations, so there are a few pallets of Dell desktops currently sitting in the conference room. The IT guy has not rolled out RMM, and is genuinely perplexed by the concept of group policy. It turns out that IT guy at this practice, for the past several, were interns that were students at the local university. The current IT guy had actually been hired from that intern pool. He spends so much time doing break/fix that he has no time to address any of the core issues, and he asks for some guidance. Already knowing that this is beyond a one-day job, I tell the project manager that we need to reschedule, and I need some of my colleagues that do the same thing in other areas of the state. I plan to spend the day doing the site survey that should have already been done. We start with the domain controller. There is no OU structure, all 200 plus users are just sitting in the default users OU. None of them actually log into Windows with those accounts though, they exist only for Exchange. Everyone logs into Windows with the user/password of med/med. Turns out med is also a domain admin. All file shares, also on domain controller, are everyone has full control. I do not even want to get into the annoyance of seeing Exchange 2003 in 2017. Those replacement desktops? They are replacing desktops running XP, including the entire billing department. Every desktop is also being upgraded to dual monitors. The new Dells only have DP and HDMI ports. There is not a single monitor in the building with a DP, including the brand new ones they ordered. Now I am ready to pull out my laptop and start looking at the network. I see an available jack and ask him if it is active. He says give me a minute and leaves the room. I thought he was going to enable the port or maybe patch it to the switch. No. He returns, says I unplugged the workstation in the next office, you should be good. Why did he unplug a workstation to activate that jack? We are out of IPs. I start looking at the firewall/switches and discover a nightmare. It looks like several people have clearly been practicing for their CCNP with a production network. Servers are on 10.10.1.x, but it is broken up into a bunch of /2830. Workstations are on a range of 192.168.1-10, all also broken up into a bunch of /2830. DHCP is only serving 1/28, and almost all workstations are static. That all of this was a problem he did not need to have, had not dawned on him. He just said a networking guy set it all up, and he thought everything was normal. He did say he frequently encountered issues with sharing where workstations could see the servers and had internet access, but they could not see half of the other workstations or the printer on the desk next to them. I decided the network was where we needed to start. I stepped out to call the project manager to tell him what I found and get approval for all this out-of-scope work. When he finally stops laughing, he tells me to take as long as I need, help is on the way, and everything is on multi-state network's dime. I stayed the weekend, since it was a fun town, and the next week, help showed up, and we turned it into what a network of that size should like. IT guy ultimately proved useful for running around switching workstations from static to DHCP, or anything else that required running around. That was about all he could be trusted with. It's always DNS SSO edition. I administer a bunch of moodless for a small tertiary institution in Sydney, Australia. These are currently hosted in M$S Blue Cloud, with a VPN connection to the campus. The VPN is handy because it means we can have locally hosted services interact with the Moodle server as if it is local, and vice versa. A few weeks ago, we started getting reports of issues logging into a couple of Moodle instances. These errors were generated from our single sign-on setup. Initially these reports were irregular, but then we heard through the grapevine that lots of students were experiencing the issue, they just weren't reporting it via our help desk. Once we reminded the students that we can't fix errors that we don't know about, and the only way we'll know about issues is if they're reported to the help desk, the trickle turned into a flood. We also started to notice an interesting correlation. Login errors were happening at times when the VPN had dropped out. The correlation was strong, but we couldn't figure out a causal link. I examined the error messages, and they all seemed to contain the phrase "could not resolve host, SSO_provider_domain. Why are we getting DNS errors from SSO when the VPN is down? Then, today as I was digesting my lunch, it occurred to me that I should check the Moodle server's DNS configuration. It turns out that the server gets its DNS config from the Blue Cloud subnet. When I examined the subnet DNS config, I found 4 internal IP addresses listed as DNS servers. I thought, perhaps I should add an external DNS server to that list. I added Google's 8.8.8.8 and rebooted the server. No change. I then looked again at the list of internal DNS addresses. 2 were in the Blue Cloud subnet IP range. They were for 2 Active Directory/DNS servers that were hosted in Blue Cloud until a few weeks ago, when they were removed as part of our migration away from cloud-hosted servers. So I removed these now non-existent DNS servers from the list and rebooted the Moodle server. No more SSO login errors. Happy students. Happy faculty. Happy IT team. So the correlation we noticed did point to the cause, and the reason we hadn't seen lots of issues from the unstable VPN was that the DNS servers in the cloud were covering for the dropouts. Until they didn't exist. Backup Groundhog Day. This is an old one, however it still haunts me until this very day. Back in the early 2000s I was working as a consultant for an IT consulting company. Customers were mainly small business. On a certain day I was sent to a new customer. You know the story: go on site, do some inventory. Check basic client and server stuff, write a report with recommendations to lure them in. This new potential customer had 2 servers. The oldest one was one of the dreaded NT4 small business servers. Old, but it had large volumes where user data was stored. Next to that one, some other IT company installed a brand new NT4 server as a standalone in a workgroup named the same as the SBS server's domain, no comment. The new server also had a nice big tape streamer, so it could back up both itself and the old SBS server. Inspecting the backup configuration on the new server, I noticed a script was run just right before the daily backup job. Curiosity killed the cat, and I had a look into the script. It was just a single robocopy kind of command, sync, with overwrite, no confirmations etc. from one server to the other. Having a second look, this script did not seem to make any sense to me. especially the direction of the sync command. I proceeded to interrogate the nearest unsuspecting user. If you edit or create any document, is it still there the next day? The answer killed off parts of my brain and destroyed any faith in humanity or technology. Of course not, that's how the system works over here. The script just synced, a once, probably manually created, copy back from the new to the old server. Thus effectively each backup job destroying any work done by those poor users. You woke me up for this? I run an IT department for a senior services organization, and I have one help desk tech. The department is rather young, and because of that and other political reasons we have not established an on-call rotation. At this time, I am the go-to when the S hits the fan. As such, I have been called in the middle of the night only about a handful of times over my 6-year tenure. Knock on wood, in most cases the times I have been called are legitimate reasons to call. My cell phone is in the emergency contacts book at the building should they need to reach me for an emergency. This morning was a different story. Phone rings 1:39 a.m. Me, this is the Grim Coder. User, hi, this is user on the TCU wing. I have a computer that isn't working. All the other computers are working, but this one isn't. Me, wipes sleep out of eye, gets up, stumbles over to computer. What exactly is happening? User, when I press certain keys on the keyboard, that key repeats on the screen. Me, you called me about a keyboard not working? User, yeah, I wanted to make sure it was working for user too, when she gets in the morning. Me, this is not an emergency. Use a different computer for the rest of your shift, we will replace it in the morning. Click. Me, stares at the ceiling for 2 hours, dozes off. Forever the AV guy. Me, at a horror con, sitting in the audience waiting for 2 guys from The Walking Dead to show up for a panel. The guy who is supposed to MC the panel shows up and finds none of the mics are working. I see him staring at the mixing board. I turn to my girlfriend, should I? Her, can't hurt. I walk up and offer to help. I look at the mixing. It is not powered on. I look at the back of the mixer and cannot find an on switch, which is a bit odd. The guy says, well, this button says power. I tell him that is the phantom power button for the mics. Yes, we want that turned on, but it is not the power switch we need. The panelists walk in. I go with what my first instinct to do, but had not done it yet. I trace the power cord to a power strip. The strip was turned off. Turn on power strip. Q&A saved, and I actually get applause.